The lecture hall's holographic display flickered with the rotating image of a Carthian ridgeback, its defensive spines highlighted in blue, while Professor Valera gestured with her tail at the anatomical breakdown. Her scales maintained their usual deep purple of academic concentration as she addressed the 73 students scattered across the tiered seating. "Note the spine articulation," she said, her four eyes tracking between the display and her students. "Purely defensive. The Carthian species evolved these after their primary predators developed." The rear door hissed open. Valera's upper pair of eyes swiveled while her lower pair remained fixed on her notes. Harlan, the human exchange student, who'd somehow convinced the xenobiology department he was qualified to attend comparative biology, shuffled through the door carrying two containers. One appeared to be a standard transport crate, the other was making noises. Her scales flickered toward lavender, just slightly. "Apologies, Professor Valera," Harlan called out, maneuvering between seats with the grace of a cargo hauler in turbulence. Traffic from the spaceport ran long. "Mr. Harlan," Valera's tail tapped once against the podium, "you were scheduled to present on Earth predatory adaptations at 1400. It is currently 1447. "Right, yeah, sorry about that." He reached the presentation floor, setting down both containers with audible thumps. Something inside the smaller one chirped. "Had to get Mika through customs. Apparently bringing apex predators through immigration requires 17 additional forms." Valera's breathing holes released a soft whistle. Her scales edged toward pink. "Apex predator," she repeated. "Oh, don't worry." Harlan was already connecting his datapad to the lecture system, completely oblivious to the way every student in the hall had simultaneously leaned backward. "She's just a baby." The holographic Carthian ridgeback dissolved, replaced by an image that made Valera's scales flash hot magenta for exactly 3 seconds before she forced them back to purple through sheer professional discipline. The creature on the display was golden-furred, heavily muscled despite its youth, with a face that was somehow both rounded and brutal. Its mouth hung open in the image, revealing teeth that belonged in a geological excavation, not a biology demonstration. "This is an African lion," Harlan announced cheerfully. "Panthera leo. Mika's a 4-month-old cub from the Earth Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in Kenya. I've been helping raise her since she was orphaned at 6 weeks. A Crystallian student in the third row made a chiming sound of distress. "That is a juvenile?" "Yep, she's actually small for her age, only about 30 pounds right now." Valera's tail had gone completely rigid. "How large do they become as adults?" "Females usually top out around 280 to 400 pounds. Males get bigger up to 550 or so. Harlan tapped his datapad, switching to a video of an adult lioness taking down something that looked remarkably similar to a Velithian in body structure. "But we're not here to talk about adults. We're here to discuss natural weapons and defensive adaptations in Earth predators." He crouched beside the smaller container, his two arms working the latches with practiced efficiency. Valera's upper eyes fixed on the container while her lower eyes scanned for the nearest emergency evacuation protocol button. "Mr. Harlan, perhaps we should discuss the theoretical aspects before introducing a live." The container opened. The creature that emerged was absurdly small compared to the holographic adult still rotating ominously above them. Tawny fur covered a compact body with oversized paws that suggested horrifying future growth potential. Its face was round, almost adorable, with large amber eyes that tracked across the lecture hall with obvious curiosity. It made a sound like a squeaky toy having an existential crisis. "Everyone, meet Mika," Harlan said, scooping the cub up with both arms. She immediately began chewing on its fingers. "She's teething right now, so she's a bit mouthy." Valera's scales were definitely pinker. Teething. "Yeah, her adult teeth are coming in. Should have a full set by 6 months." He held Mika up like she was a prize at an agricultural exhibition. The cub's back legs dangled, paws flexing in the air. "See those pads? That's adaptation number 1, silent movement. The pads absorb sound when stalking prey. Lions are ambush predators, so stealth is crucial." A Velithian student in the front row, Kessel, Valera noted absently, one of her better pupils, raised one arm tentatively. "Professor, is it standard practice to allow unrestrained predators in academic settings?" "Mr. Steeden, Harlan assures us his presentation meets all safety protocols," Valera said, her voice perfectly level despite her scales now resembling a sunset. "Though I noticed the documentation he submitted listed his specimen as a common Earth companion animal." "Well, yeah." Harlan set Mika down on the demonstration table. She immediately began batting at his datapad. "Humans have kept cats in our homes for like 10,000 years. Mika's bigger than a house cat, obviously, but same family. Felidae. You keep predators in your dwellings." This from a gaseous Matherian student whose containment suit had just gone from clear to an alarmed yellow. "Sure, dogs too, and they're from an even more cooperative hunting species." But we're getting off track. Harlan gently extracted his datapad from Mika's exploratory mauling. Adaptation number 2, retractable claws. Valera's breathing holes released a sustained whistle. Now this is really cool, Harlan continued, apparently interpreting her distress signal as academic interest. Most Earth predators have fixed claws. Canids, for example, that's dogs and wolves, can't retract their claws at all, but felids evolved retractable claws for several reasons: keeps them sharp, allows for silent movement, and provides a surprise advantage during prey capture. He picked up one of Mika's front paws. The cub, who had been focused on trying to murder a stylus that had rolled across the table, allowed this handling with the patience of someone deeply accustomed to humans doing weird things. See? Right now, paws look harmless. Harlan displayed the fuzzy paw to the class. Several students were now recording on their devices, though Valera noted that at least Olt had moved to seats farther from the demonstration floor. But watch what happens when I applied gentle pressure to the pad. He pressed softly on the center of Mika's paw. 4 curved claws extended from hidden sheaths in the paw, each one tapering to a point that could only be described as surgically sharp. The crystalline student from earlier made a sound like shattering glass. Fascinating, right? Harlan seemed genuinely delighted by the horrified silence that had gripped the lecture hall. These are baby claws, only about half an inch right now. Adult lion claws can reach 1.5 inches in length. The retraction mechanism involves specialized tendons and ligaments that... Mika, bored with being a demonstration prop, chose that moment to squirm in Harlan's grip. Her claws, still extended, caught the fabric of his shirt. Ow, okay, yeah, sharp. He carefully detached her, leaving 4 parallel tears in his sleeve. Anyway, the claws serve multiple purposes: gripping prey, climbing, defense, and establishing dominance within the pride. Lions are social hunters, so they also use their claws in territorial disputes with... Mika, no, that's not food. The cub had spotted the holographic display controls and was now attempting to kill the light beam projecting the image of her adult counterpart. Valera's scales achieved a shade of magenta that wasn't supposed to be biologically possible. Her tail had moved from rigid to twitching at the tip, a sign her students knew meant someone was about to receive a very pointed lecture about proper academic preparation. Mr. C. Harlan, she said, her voice achieving that particular tone of deadly calm that professors across all species seemed to master when you submitted your presentation proposal requesting live demonstration of natural weapons. I assumed you meant something along the lines of a passive display, perhaps preserved samples, possibly holographic recreation. Oh, you can't really appreciate predatory adaptations without seeing them in action. Harlan had both arms occupied trying to redirect Mika away from a Velithian student's backpack, which the cub had decided was an enemy that needed to be subdued. Trust me, this is way more educational than just talking about it. In action, Valera repeated. Well, yeah, like check this out. He set Mika back on the demonstration table and pulled a small object from his pocket. This is adaptation number 3, the prey drive response. The object was a feather on a string. Mika's entire body language changed instantly. Her rounded ears, which had been swiveling casually to track sounds around the lecture hall, pinned forward. Her amber eyes dilated until they were almost entirely black. Her hindquarters lowered into a crouch that would have been textbook perfect if textbooks covered things that are about to murder you. She wiggled. Her back legs made tiny adjustment movements, each one winding her muscles tighter. The wiggle is actually a biomechanical optimization, Harlan explained, dragging the feather across the table surface. Helps them gauge distance and prepare for the explosive muscle engagement required for... Mika pounced. The feather never stood a chance. Neither did the datapad it landed on, which skittered across the table and clattered to the floor. Mika pursued with single-minded intensity, her oversized paws providing traction that let her corner at angles that violated several laws of physics. She caught the feather, killed it thoroughly with her back claws, another adaptation, Harlan seemed thrilled to point out, then looked up at Harlan with an expression that clearly communicated more. See that hunting sequence? Stalk, wiggle, pounce, capture, kill. That's pure instinct. Nobody taught her that. She was doing this at 3 weeks old with her siblings. Harlan retrieved his datapad, which now bore several new scratches. Adult lions use this exact same sequence to take down prey animals weighing up to 1,000 pounds. Kessel's arm went up again. Question. Sure. If these creatures can kill prey 5 times their adult body weight, and humans have kept them as companions for thousands of years. Chi-chu-c-c-c-com. Kessel's scales had gone pale violet. How many humans do they consume annually? Oh no, we don't. Harlan laughed. Okay, so there's occasionally issues with wild lions in areas where human settlements overlap with lion territory, but domesticated cats don't eat humans. We feed them. Mika gets about 2 pounds of prepared meat twice a day, plus supplements. You feed the predators, Valera said faintly. Well, yeah. Can't have her hunting the neighbors' pets. The lecture hall had gone very quiet. The neighbors, a student whispered from somewhere in the back rows, also have predators? I mean, most people have cats or dogs or both. My street probably has like 30 cats total, maybe 20 dogs. Harlan was digging in his larger container now. Speaking of feeding, Mika's probably getting hungry. It's almost her dinner time. He pulled out a sealed bag of what appeared to be raw meat. Valera's breathing holes achieved a pitch usually reserved for emergency evacuation signals. Mr. Harlan, perhaps we should conclude the live demonstration portion of your presentation. But I haven't even gotten to her vocalizations yet. Lions have this incredible range of sounds they use for communication. Roars can be heard up to 5 miles away, though Mika's too young to do a full roar. Mostly she just makes squeaky sounds and... The bag seal released with a soft hiss. Mika's head snapped around so fast it was almost a blur. Her nostrils flared. Those amber eyes, which had been merely interested in the feather, became laser-focused on the container. She made a sound that started as a squeak and ended in something that sounded distressingly like a miniature version of the roar Harlan claimed she couldn't do yet. Oh yeah, she definitely smells dinner. Harlan seemed utterly unconcerned by the fact that a predator was now staring at food with an intensity that suggested she might go through him to get to it. So the feeding response involves several fascinating behaviors. Mika's muscles bunched. Mr. Harlan, Valera said, her voice very carefully controlled. Yeah, is the creature about to? Mika launched herself off the table, not at the meat. At the lecture hall's main viewing window, where a maintenance drone had just passed by outside, its blinking lights and movement apparently triggering every hunting instinct in her small, terrifying body. She hit the reinforced glass with all 30 pounds of juvenile apex predator enthusiasm, claws fully extended, making a sound that was definitely not a squeak. The glass held. Mika did not care. She was too busy trying to climb the window, her back claws scrabbling for purchase while her front claws left scratches in the surface that was supposed to be scratch-resistant. Every student with functioning legs had stood up. Several were already moving toward exits. Harlan just sighed and walked over to collect his demonstration specimen, who is now hanging from the window about 4 feet up, still determined to murder the drone that had already flown away. Okay, so that's the prey drive I mentioned, he said, reaching up with both arms to detach Mika from the window. She came away with an indignant squeak roar. Anything that moves can trigger the hunting response. It's hardwired. You can't help it. Valera's scales were now a shade of magenta that was going to require medical consultation. Her tail had gone from twitching to thrashing. Cannot help it, she repeated, her voice achieving a flatness that suggested she was channeling every ounce of professional composure to avoid screaming. Nope, pure instinct. Harlan had Mika tucked under one arm now. She was still fixated on the window, her head tracking back and forth in case the drone returned. Which brings me to adaptation number 4, the biological drive to hunt even when not hungry. Most earth predators hunt for food, but cats, especially big cats, will hunt for practice, entertainment, or just because something moved. It's enrichment for them. Enrichment. Yeah, keeps them mentally stimulated, prevents boredom. Actually, that's probably why she went after the drone. She's already eaten this morning, so she's just playing. He scratched behind Mika's ears with his free hand. He leaned into it, purring loud enough to be heard across the lecture hall, her previous murder attempt apparently forgotten. See? Perfectly friendly. The purring sound made several students flinch. Kessel, still braver than most, spoke up again. That vibration. Is that a thread display? What? No, that's purring. It means she's happy. The predator, Kessa said slowly, makes the same sound when content as it does when preparing to attack. Oh no, you can totally tell the difference. Happy purrs are steady, annoyed purrs have a hitch, and if she's about to attack, she goes silent. Harlan demonstrated by covering Mika's eyes with one hand. The purring immediately stopped. He uncovered them. The purring resumed. See, Valera's breathing holes had achieved frequencies only perceptible to species with enhanced hearing range, several of whom were now clutching their auditory organs in distress. I believe, she said with the care of someone defusing an explosive device, we have sufficient material for evaluation. Perhaps you could secure your demonstration specimen, and we could discuss the theoretical implications of... The lecture hall's automatic lighting system chose that moment to cycle into its energy-saving mode, dimming the overhead panels and creating dramatic shadows across the tiered seating. Something in the darkness moved, a student's tail swishing nervously. Mika's head rotated toward it with mechanical precision. Her pupils dilated again. She wiggled. Oh no, Harlan said. Mika exploded out of his arms with a burst of strength that should not have been possible from something that weighed less than most textbooks. Hit the demonstration table with all four paws, used it as a launching pad, and bounded directly toward the student whose tail had committed the cardinal sin of moving at the wrong moment. "She's just playing," Harlan shouted, already running after her. "Don't run, wait, no, definitely don't run, that makes it worse." The student ran. Mika, delighted by this excellent game, gave chase with the joyful enthusiasm of a creature that had no concept of appropriate classroom behavior. Valera stood at her podium, her scales now locked at maximum magenta, her tail completely still, and watched as 73 students attempted to evacuate through 4 exits while a juvenile Earth apex predator parked across the tiered seating in pursuit of the most entertaining moving target she'd encountered all day. Her lower eyes tracked to the emergency response button. Her upper eyes tracked to her carefully prepared lecture notes, which were now scattered across the floor where Mika had knocked them during her initial window assault. Somewhere in the chaos, Harlan was still trying to explain that this was educational. Valera pressed the emergency response button. Then, with the composure of someone who had taught comparative biology for 47 years and thought they had seen everything, she reached for her datapad and began composing an incident report. She titled it, "Reassessment of Earth Species Threat Classification, Urgent Review Required." The screaming in the background, she decided, would provide excellent supporting evidence. The campus security team arrived in 47 seconds, which Valera noted with professional detachment was 14 seconds faster than their average response time. This probably had something to do with the phrase "loose predator" in her emergency alert. What they found was Mika cornering a crystalline student in the gap between 2 rows of seats, her tail swishing with predatory satisfaction, while the student's body chimed frantically in distress harmonics. Harlan was 3 rows away, blocked by a barrier of overturned chairs that the fleeing students had left in their wake. "Mika, no," Harlan called, climbing over a desk. "That's not a toy. Mika. Mika, I have treats." The security chief, a broad-shouldered Krenthian named Vasek, with gray-scaled skin and 2 sturdy arms built for restraining unruly students, froze in the doorway. His species had evolved as persistence hunters on a world where predators were small, timid, and easily intimidated by size. He was staring at something that clearly operated under completely different biological principles. "What," he said, his translator struggling with the pitch of his voice, "is that?" "Earth lion cub," Valera replied, her scales still locked at their maximum stress coloration. Her tail had started twitching again. 4 months old, 30 pounds. Apex predator. Apparently harmless. Harmless, Vasek repeated. According to Mr. Harlan, they both watched as Mika finally pounced on the crystallion's tail, which had been swishing in panic. The student made a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Mika, thrilled by this response, released the tail and immediately crouched for another pounce. "She's playing." Harlan had finally cleared the furniture obstacle course. "It's enrichment behavior. She doesn't understand that she's scary." Fosek's hand moved toward his shock restraint. "Should I activate containment protocols?" "Please don't shock her," Harlan said, managing to scoop Mika up just as she launched her second attack. She squirmed in his grip, making squeaky sounds of protest. "She's just a baby. She doesn't know any better. The creature has claws." Vasek gestured with one arm at the scratches on the window, clearly visible even from across the room, and teeth, and attacked a student. "She didn't attack, she was playing. There's a difference." "Explain the difference to me," Valera said, her voice achieving that same dangerous flatness from earlier, "in terms that justify why my lecture hall now requires emergency evacuation." Harlan had the decency to look sheepish. Mika, meanwhile, had gotten distracted by his hair and was batting at it with one paw, claws mercifully retracted. "Okay, so, in my defense, I did mention she has a prey drive." "You did not mention," Valera said, each word carefully enunciated, "that the prey drive would activate in response to normal student movement." "Well, I mean, I was getting to that part of the presentation. You were feeding it. Her. And, yeah, I was gonna demonstrate feeding behaviors, but then she saw the drone, and look, this is actually a great teaching moment about instinctive responses versus learned behavior." Vasek's translator made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a malfunction. "You want to continue the lesson. I mean, everyone's already here. Well, mostly everyone." Harlan glanced around at the lecture hall, which was now empty except for 2 security officers who'd appeared behind Vasek and the Crystallian student who was still trapped behind the desks, too frightened to move. "Where did everyone go?" "They evacuated," Valera said, "when the predator began hunting them." "She wasn't hunting, she was—" "Okay, yeah, from their perspective, I can see how it looked like hunting." Harlan adjusted his grip on Mika, who had moved from attacking his hair to gnawing on his thumb. But see, she's completely calm now. The prey drive only activates when something triggers it. As if to demonstrate the universe's sense of humor, the emergency lighting system kicked in, casting the lecture hall in rotating amber beams. Mika's head snapped toward the moving lights. "Oh no," Harlan said again. "Restrain the creature," Vasek ordered, his hand now definitely moving toward his shock restraint. "Don't, she's fine, she's just visually stimulated by—" "Micah, no!" The cub had already twisted out of his grip with the liquid grace that her species had apparently perfected over millions of years of evolution. She hit the floor running, her oversized paws providing traction that should have been impossible on the smooth lecture hall surface. The amber emergency lights reflected off her eyes, creating the distinct impression of a creature from a horror simulation. She bounded toward the rotating light source, which was mounted on the wall near the emergency exit. One of the security officers, a young Volithian whose scales immediately flushed bright pink, backed away so quickly he collided with Vasek. "It's charging us," he said, his breathing holes whistling. "She's going after the light," Harlan corrected, sprinting after Mika. "She doesn't care about you. She cares about the moving bright thing that—" "Mika, down!" Mika did not understand down. Mika understood shiny thing moving must catch. She launched herself at the wall, claws extended, and managed to climb approximately 3 feet before gravity reminded her that 4-month-old lion cubs, while impressive, cannot yet defy physics entirely. She slid down the wall with a squeak that sounded almost offended, then immediately prepared to try again. "Somebody turn off the emergency lights," Vasek said, his professional composure cracking slightly. "Can't," the younger security officer said, tapping his wrist display. "They're on automatic lockout once activated. 30-minute minimum cycle for safety protocols." Valera's tail hit the podium with a thump that made everyone except Mika flinch. "So we have 30 minutes of rotating lights that will continuously trigger the predator's hunting response." "Prey drive," Harlan corrected, managing to grab Mika just as she started her second wall climbing attempt. "And it's fine, I'll just cover her eyes until— ow." Mika, annoyed at being restrained again, had deployed her claws. Not aggressively, Valera noted with her professional observational skills. The cub had simply extended them for grip while trying to squirm free, and Harlan's arm happened to be in the way. 4 parallel scratches appeared on his forearm, beading with blood. "Medical emergency," Vasek said into his communicator. Lecture Hall 7. Predator attack. "It's not an attack," Harlan protested, even as blood dripped onto the floor. "She's just being a normal cub. This is how they play. I've had way worse from her siblings." "You have multiple ones," the younger officer said faintly. "Well, yeah, Mika's from a litter of 3. Her brothers are even more energetic than she is." The Crystallian student, still trapped behind the desks, made a sound like breaking glass. "There are more. I mean, just her littermates. But Earth has thousands of lions, tens of thousands probably, plus all the other big cats, tigers, leopards, jaguars. And then there's the small cats, which includes everything from house cats to caracals to—" "Stop talking," Valera said, her breathing holes now producing harmonics that our colleagues would later describe as the sound of someone's sanity departing. "Please stop talking." The medical team arrived, led by Dr. Team Kesses, a methodical Volithian whose scales maintained their professional gray even in crisis situations. She took one look at Harlan's bleeding arm, one look at Mika squirming in his grip, and one look at Valera's magenta scales. "Right," she said, her tail already reaching for her medical kit. "Who wants to explain why there's a Class 7 predator in an academic facility?" "Class 7? Harlan looked genuinely confused. "Mika's not dangerous. She's basically a kitten." "Mr. Harlan," Dr. Kesses said, applying antiseptic to his arm with her free hand while her tail organized bandaging supplies, "I have access to the Galactic Biological Database. Earth felines are classified as Class 7 based on their hunting success rate, adaptable biology, and casual disregard for species larger than themselves." She wrapped his arm with practiced efficiency. "The notation specifically mentions that humans keep them as companions, which moved them from Class 6 to Class 7 because any species that befriends apex predators for entertainment purposes requires elevated threat assessment. That's actually kind of unfair to cats. They're very affectionate." As if to prove this point, Mika had stopped squirming and was now rubbing her head against Harlan's chest, purring loud enough to be heard over the emergency lighting system. Dr. Kesseran's scales flickered toward pink. "It's making the threatening sound again." "That's not threatening, that's— you know what, never mind." Harlan looked around at the security team, the medical personnel, the destroyed lecture hall, and the professor whose scales were now going to require professional color correction. "I'm getting the sense my presentation didn't go as well as I'd hoped." "Your presentation," Valera said, her voice very quiet and very controlled, "resulted in the evacuation of 70 students, 3 injured personnel, property damage to university equipment, and activation of emergency protocols typically reserved for hazardous material containment. When you put it that way, it sounds bad. How would you put it? Harlan considered this, absently scratching behind Mika's ears while she purred and kneaded his chest with her claws. Educational demonstration with some minor crowd management issues? The silence that followed was broken only by the rotating emergency lights and Mika's enthusiastic purring. Mr. Harlan, Vasek said finally, I'm going to need you to secure the creature in its transport container. Sure, yeah, that's probably a good idea at this point. Harlan walked over to the demonstration table where he'd left Mika's crate. She went into it willingly, apparently exhausted from her adventure. See? Perfectly cooperative when she's tired. When she's tired, Valera repeated. Well, yeah. Cubs sleep like 18 hours a day. She's probably gonna nap for the next 3 hours now. He closed the crate. Mika, visible through the transparent front panel, circled twice, kneaded her bedding with alternating paws, and curled into a compact ball of golden fur. Within 30 seconds, she was asleep. The lecture hall went very quiet. So, Harlan said into the silence, about my grade for this presentation. Valera's scales achieved a shade of magenta that wasn't in any medical database. Her tail had gone completely still. Her breathing holes produced a single, sustained note that communicated more than words ever could. Dr. Kesserin, demonstrating the survival instincts her species was known for, took 3 steps backward. Vasek's hand moved to his shock restraint again, though whether to use it on Harlan or to defend him from Valera was unclear. The younger security officer activated his recording device. This was going to be referenced in training materials for years. Mr. Harlan, Valera said, each syllable articulated with the precision of a surgical laser. You will collect your demonstration specimen. You will exit this facility. You will file a complete incident report detailing every single safety protocol you violated. And you will never, ever, ever bring another Earth creature to my classroom again. But I got approval from... The approval, Valera continued, was based on your documentation listing a common companion animal, not an apex predator capable of scaling walls, hunting multiple targets simultaneously, and inducing mass panic among 73 university students. Technically, she only chased 1 student. The others were just being cautious. The magenta of Valera's scales intensified. Right, Harlan said quickly, leaving now, taking Mika, filing reports. Got it. He picked up the transport crate, gathered his scattered presentation materials with his free hand, and headed for the exit with the speed of someone who had finally recognized immediate danger. At the doorway, he paused. For what it's worth, Professor, that really was educational. I bet none of those students will ever forget the lecture on predatory adaptations. Valera's breathing holes achieved a pitch that shattered 2 specimen jars on the shelf behind her desk. Harlan left. The emergency lights continued their rotation for another 23 minutes. Valera spent that time standing at her podium, scales locked at maximum stress coloration, while Dr. Kesherin quietly treated the crystalline student for minor panic-induced crystallization, and Vasek filed approximately 17 different incident reports. When the lights finally cycled off and the lecture hall returned to its normal illumination, Valera discovered that her tail had developed a persistent twitch that wouldn't respond to conscious control. Her scales remained stubbornly magenta, and on her desk she found a datapad notification from the Dean of Xenobiology. Subject, Mr. Harlan's presentation evaluation. She opened it with the resignation of someone who knew exactly what they were about to read. Professor Valera, based on student feedback and security reports, Mr. Harlan's demonstration of Earth predatory adaptations has been deemed the most memorable and educational presentation in the department's history. Students report complete retention of all discussed material regarding hunting behaviors, prey drive mechanics, and predatory adaptations. Congratulations on facilitating such an impactful learning experience. Mr. Harlan has been awarded top marks for his presentation. However, per safety protocols, he is now prohibited from bringing live specimens to any future demonstrations. Regards, Dean Thelvan. Valera's scales flickered between magenta and violet, unable to settle on which emotion was dominant. Top marks. Most memorable. Banned from future demonstrations. Her tail twitched. From across campus, faint and distant but unmistakable, came the sound of Mika's squeaky roar as Harlan presumably tried to load her back into his transport pod. Valera closed her office door, activated her privacy screens, and spent the next 15 minutes making a sound that her colleagues would later describe as somewhere between laughing and screaming. Her scales stayed magenta for 3 days. The students who'd been present started a support group. The scratches on the lecture hall window became a campus landmark, and every subsequent comparative biology class, when discussing predatory adaptations, included a mandatory footnote, reference materials only. Live demonstrations prohibited per incident report 2847. H. Harlan submitted his next presentation proposal 2 weeks later. Subject: defensive adaptations in earth herbivores. Specimen: common dairy cow, very gentle, definitely won't cause any problems. Valera denied it immediately. Her scales turned magenta just reading the request.